All right, so we'll start with one of the most famous samples of Nautilus, which is Run DMC Beats to the Rhyme, and this is the Run DMC 12-inch box set. And I mean, this is probably of all these songs, this is probably one of the biggest hits, most radio play.
Yeah.
I mean, tell us about it. Does it ring any bells for you, or?
Yes, you might see me burst into tears.
Really?
As you're playing this, because the bad news for me about this record is that this was the record where I learned one of the hard, cruel realities of licensing sampling, which is statute of limitations.
Ah.
Oh.
And by the time I found out about this, I was a little bit slow catching up to the hip-hop field, and I
Right.
wasn't paying any attention to Run DMC. And
Yeah.
when they first told me who it was, I had no idea what they were talking about.
Right.
Run DMC, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So little by little, I started to find out that it was a very big record and a lot of sales units of this thing. And because of my recording being sampled, theoretically, had I been there at the very beginning, even if I'd licensed it properly with them, I would have been a nice part of a really big thing.
Yeah.
As it turned out, I had to fight for what I've gotten out of it, which is not really that much, because the statute of limitations.
Right.
If just while we're on the legal side of it, there's a big difference between a kind of relatively innocent usage and fraud. If it's a deliberate fraudulent usage, then there's no statute of limitations.
Yeah.
But the fraud part of it is the most difficult to prove, the most expensive to go into litigation over, and then it's a really tough judgment call as to whether to do it. And I've only gone into the tough litigation a couple of times. And it's scary because you could lose, and if I lose a litigation, then I could end up broke too. So it all was from something that I didn't really have anything to do with. So I have to make a judgment call about it. In this case, the thing that I regret and why the tears flow a little bit is that I wish it could have been legitimate from the very beginning, and then we'd all be happy. And I'd make a little piece of the action, and because I did contribute to it.
Yes.
Did you ever cross paths with these guys at all, or?
No.
Okay. All right.
They didn't approach me.
Yeah.
I think there was an awful lot at that time of kind of hoping that I wouldn't show up.
Right.
Well, I also think that it didn't really become. It was a learning process on both sides.
Yes.
The rappers and artists such as yourself, that sampling it was just normal for the rappers. They didn't think they were necessarily doing anything wrong. But when you look at it from an artistic point of view and from an artist themselves, yes, that is that whole song is me. And I think a lot of jazz artists and rock artists had there was a huge learning curve that maybe. With the Bismarcky, with the Turtle settlement, maybe opened everything up.
I don't
changed
think everything.
I don't think you were the only one. And also, I bet you there was a lot of inner well, I don't want to necessarily do all that, because they're being creative and they're doing their creative thing, and you can probably appreciate that. But on the same token, it's that's what I did, and you guys just played with it or whatever. But so I bet you as an artist, you had a little bit of inner turmoil going on, well, I don't want to, but
absolutely.
Okay.
I don't teach that much, but I do occasionally go to University of Music School and do some either master class or clinic type of stuff. And very, very often the subject that I find that I'm able to be the most useful about is music business. And kids they go into music, they don't want to know about it, they don't pay any attention to it, it seems unartistic, some way that they think they're schlocky just if they're thinking about dollars rather than creativity. So it takes a lot to change their mind and to make them feel good about both sides of it. That just being a good business person doesn't have to compromise your creativity, but it can make the difference between being able to make a livelihood out of what you do or getting ripped off or ripping somebody else off.
Right.
I just was with, and I don't want to mention his name because I don't want him to be embarrassed if he ever read this interview, but I was talking with a young musician friend of mine who's in his mid-20s, and he's very, very, very talented. And he only indirectly was aware of the way hip-hop artists put their stuff together in chunks and sampling and manipulating audio and all that stuff. And he wanted to do his own creative project and has been working, he said, a couple of years on this stuff without thinking about the business aspect of it. And meantime, he was sampling other recordings without doing anything about getting a license for them. And on one of the songs that he was working on, there were like 15 or 20 samples from famous records, famous artists.
Awesome.
And he said, well, you don't, I manipulate them so much, you'd hardly recognize it. And I said, that's not going to help you. You can't do it anymore. You can't get away with it. And he was kind of heartbroken and maybe learned his lesson the hard way, that these days you just cannot do that. You've got to go through it in a legitimate way.
Proper channels, right.
And if you do, I was pointing out to him some other experience that I've had. If there's a young artist that's not successful, they're not selling a lot or whatever, if you can enter into a back-end type of licensing in which it doesn't cost the artist anything for you to give them a license, but you get a bigger percentage down the line if it's a hit, which you should, because they don't have to pay anything, and at that point, if it's done properly, they're going to be happy anyway because it's a hit, and they're going to get their share
everybody's
of it,
taking care of it.
rather than up front when they don't have the money, pricing them out of business so they can't be creative, they can't use your stuff. So I'm definitely in favor of that whole new thing, and I'm starting to see some businesses starting up that actually help the hip hop artists or the sampling style artists get to the owned copyright recordings and help them straighten all that stuff out, how to do it, how to keep it simple, and how to make it doable.
Awesome.
All right. It's Run DMC, Beats to the Rhyme with Bob James.